Hello, so my name is Adam Williams, and this talk is going to take a brief look at a project I was involved in at the start of the year. The goal, to replace Warwick's post-tracking system with something a bit more modern. Along the way, I'm going to tell you the story of how we even got to this point, what it's like to try and change things in a university, and some of the interesting challenges that came along with this piece of work. So, this story actually begins in 2015, and at this point, I'm a first-year undergraduate. I am studying for my computer science degree in this building here, and I'm living on campus in the Arthur Vic Halls of Residence. And a few months into my first year, I've pretty much gotten to grips with life on campus at Warwick. And probably from spending far too much of my maintenance loan on random things from Amazon, I've also gotten pretty familiar with the post service. So for those of you who aren't familiar, I'll give you a little bit of background. In the very beginning, we had these postal notification cards, and you'll notice that these cards have got the big text, "Do not lose this card," printed in the middle. Now, my understanding was that these cards essentially were the Poststream database. So the fact that these cards had been sent was the only record really that existed of your item being delivered to the Poststream. So if you lost your card, you kind of caused a bit of a world of pain in the Poststream for estates when they had to try and figure out where your parcel had actually been stored. And so by the time I got to Warwick, things had modernised a little bit. So we still had the notification cards that got posted to you, but you could go online and check if your items were ready to pick up with this neat little online form, provided that you knew the tracking number. And here's a photo of Westwood, where you'd inevitably have to trek to from central campus. You can sort of see just on the left-hand side there, the post room, and it was about a mile, maybe 1.5 miles from central campus. So it's a bit of a trek to get out there. So back to the online form. I'd maybe used it half a dozen times when I noticed something interesting about it. It says, for carrier numbers, please put a % at both ends of your tracking number. And it got me thinking. Some of you might have realised the significance of the % character already, but I'm going to quickly go over how this page probably worked. So we know the items are stored in a database, so we have a table of items somewhere. And each item has got a tracking number based on the barcode printed on the outside of the package. And so the query here, written in structured query language or SQL, might look something a little bit like this. And we're using the like keyword here to say, I want to find all items with a tracking number that starts with QA0117. So the % is sort of like a wildcard. You can think of it as a star character to select the items. And so we know that whatever we type in the text box ends up in this part of the query. And we also know that we can do wildcard searches to find items with a tracking number that starts with or ends with something. But what if our search was just a wildcard on its own? So naturally, I tried it. And it took a really long time to respond back to me. But I eventually got given this page here. And what's it showing? Well, it looks like pretty much every single item that actually exists in the post database dumped onto one big page, which isn't great from a security perspective, but I thought it was pretty cool having just managed to do this. So obviously at this point, I stopped poking with it and figured I'd better let somebody know. So I let IT know that it was broken in this way. And that's the sort of idea of responsible disclosure, let people know what sort of security problem exists so they can go and fix it without publicizing the vulnerability. And so this was taken up by the security team. A fix of sorts was implemented by the Estates Department, and that was the last I heard about the post tracker for quite a while, until 2019. Now, what am I actually doing in 2019? Well, at this point, I'm a Warwick graduate. I've graduated. I managed to just about survive my final year and the sleepless nights involved with writing my dissertation. And day to day, I work on software engineering projects as a contractor. A lot of my work is in the rail world, so ticket retailing, seat reservations, fares, that sort of thing. And it can be pretty fun, pretty good fun. But I guess I never actually got around to properly leaving Warwick after I graduated. And so I've ended up doing quite a lot of work with IT services too, as a client. And universities are honestly a pretty great place to do work. It's a really supportive environment and I enjoy it. So back to the post tracker. It was around about this time, while I was working with IT services, that I was asked to take another look at the post tracker, just to see if the sort of vulnerabilities that we knew about had been properly mitigated. And surely 4 years on, it was now 100% secure, right? Well, after I pointed at it a little bit, it became clear it was a little bit of a train wreck, and there was no pun intended there. So here you can sort of see a query I've typed in, and this query is demonstrating the system is vulnerable to something called SQL injection, which is a classic security vulnerability. And some of you were probably already thinking about this all along from the original query I showed you a few slides ago. But the basic idea is that we can sort of hijack the real query by typing in this text and send our own commands along with the search term. And you can see we've got a single quote character after the foos, and that single quote character sort of terminates the query, and then we've got our own stuff in afterwards. Now, I'm not going to go into too much detail on what I did here, but it was quite a fun one because there are a couple of countermeasures that had been put in place by states that I had to work around to get this to work. But yeah, the end result was this was not secure. It was vulnerable to the security issues, and it wasn't fit for purpose in this state. So it's no good just pointing out that it's secure, turning off the server, and then declaring the problem solved, right? Warwick has to provide a post service for everyone who lives on campus, and the old system was critical for providing that. I guess in some ways you could describe this system as a type of shadow IT. It had been built outside of central IT because central IT didn't provide a good enough solution for this business problem. IT services didn't have a post-tracking system that estates could just use, and so estates had innovated and built something useful that solved their problems, but had tripped up when it came to security. And honestly, I can't really blame them. Security's hard. They were using Microsoft Access to build this tool and some PHP, and they're not experts. So it was sort of inevitable that this would happen. So around about this time, we spoke to estates, and they were also running into problems with scaling their system. So it sort of struggled with handling lots of parcels. And the original developer had retired from working at the university, so we decided it was probably best to try and build something new. And we had quite a tight timescale on this. I think I had about 4 or 5 weeks to sort of build something that met these needs. So what does the post system need? What requirements do we have in a replacement post system? Well, we need to be able to process incoming parcels. We want to be able to store the tracking number on each parcel so that we can do an audit and look up and see what happened to a parcel. And we don't really want to make the guys in the States have to type in this tracking number every single time they get a package from Royal Mail. So probably we want to support some sort of barcode scanner. And also, estates wanted to keep track of the carrier that had delivered the items. So ideally, we'd store that as well. And I guess really we want to automatically detect if a parcel has come from Royal Mail or Amazon or TPD, so that we have this sort of process that doesn't take long for each parcel, because they're handling hundreds of these every day. And we also need to know if the recipient lives on campus or not. Potentially, we can automatically read this from Warwick Accommodations database. We also need to be able to handle collections. Students need to be able to collect their parcels. Now, they all have neat NFC student cards, so maybe we can use those and make life a little bit easier. Scan the NFC card and work out who they are and what parcels they have due to collect. And I suppose we can also send them a push notification. If they've got the My Warwick app installed, we can let them know when their parcel's ready to collect and make life a little bit easier in that respect too. And finally, we need to be able to handle the return to sender process. So couriers need to be able to take away unwanted parcels. You wouldn't believe how many students go and buy expensive things and then never pick them up from the post room, or old tenants who used to live on campus a few years ago accidentally order stuff to the post room using their old address. Or, in some cases, people ordering items that the post room cannot process. So the example I quite like that they told me about was somebody once ordered a full-sized fridge to the post room. It came on the back of a truck, sort of on a pallet. And, that's totally inappropriate to sort of hand over to a student. How would they even take it back to their accommodation block? Would it fit through the door? I'm not really convinced. So that sort of item just got sent straight back to the sender. And so I asked the states, how do you want to be able to access this sort of system? And it was clear they wanted to use some handheld devices so that they weren't tied down to a desk somewhere, but also they wanted the flexibility of having a laptop or desktop that they could do their work from. So I started testing some devices. Highly scientific way of testing whether the NFC reading works by stacking Post-it notes on top of each other. That was good fun. And I got some ideas as to what we might be able to buy. And this was the sort of tech stack that I settled on. I'd never used Kotlin before, so I figured I may as well learn it for this. It might be fun. And also, if you're familiar with Spring, we use Spring Boot to build the sort of web end, and then Android for the app, and Postgres, and something called Hibernate for actually storing the data. And the tech stack isn't too important, but I know some people are interested in the actual nitty-gritty aspects of how we built it. And this is what we came up with. So this is the view for students. They can see what parcels they have to collect. And these are the notifications we send them when things come into the post stream for them to collect. Quite handy. You just get a something on your phone to say, hey, look, your Amazon parcel's ready for you to pick up. And we've got some good feedback on that one. And for the actual guys in the States, this is what they use. So we have a dedicated app. It's a sort of semi-native app. We have some native functionality for reading university cards, some camera stuff, but it mostly wraps the sort of web app, and that's from where they can process incoming parcels. So they can scan them into the system, and they can also handle collections. And it will tell them where the parcels are inside the post stream, which shelf they're on, and how they need to go and pick them up and hand them over to the resident. And we also solved the problem of automatically working out which carrier had delivered the items using a bunch of regular expressions. So it turns out that the sort of tracking barcodes you see on your Amazon parcel or your Royal Mail parcel are pretty much predictable. So you can work out reasonably easily, which carrier they belong to with these sorts of patterns. So really, that made their life a lot easier. They were saving a massive amount of time entering in parcels into the system. So we did encounter some challenges with this project. The first one, I like to call them campus ghosts. So when I first started the project, I sort of assumed that everyone would be stored in one central database, and it turns out that's not how it works at all. So if you're a member of staff, if you're family of staff, if you're in the residential life team, you're not in the database, you're just in a random spreadsheet somewhere. And so in order to get your details into the post system, we ended up with this pretty ugly spreadsheet importer, which isn't ideal at all. I wish we had a nice central database where everything was stored, but it's one of those things that's difficult to sort of change across the university. We also ran into the problem of barcodes not being unique. So it turns out carriers, Amazon, will reuse barcodes. And our solution to this was to come up with our own barcode stickers, barcode labels. And this is what States asked for. So we had sort of QR code labels, just a random ID, and print them out and stick them on each item. And later on, I made them colourful so you could sort of differentiate between multiple parcels on the same shelf, and sort of work out which one was which one you needed to pick up and hand over to the residents that were collecting their items. And I suppose that one of the other challenges was stakeholders across the university. So there are lots of people who have an interest in posts on campus, and it's hard to please all of them. So some people were upset that they weren't consulted about this change. But I think it was positive. We fixed some security bugs, we improved the process. So but you just need to accept sometimes that you can't please everyone, and just do what you can. And finally, we had a lot of red tape, sort of GDPR concerns around getting access to student address information and being able to process it, which is frustrating for me, because from my perspective, we were improving the security of the system, replacing it with something modern. And it was a little bit frustrating to hit into so many roadblocks when really we were just going and doing something that wasn't much different to what was already in place, but we were doing it in a secure manner. And we eventually sorted it out. We had meetings, discussed it with solicitors at the university, and it was fine. But it took a lot of time. So to conclude, no good deed goes unpunished. If you go and find security issues in a system, you might well just get roped into rewriting it later on in life, maybe a few years down the line, depending on what you end up doing. But I think we ended up with something better than what we had, something more modern, more usable, more secure. And ultimately, that's really what matters. We want to have a good student experience. We want to make life easier for staff in the States who have to run the postal service. And I think it was a success. It went well. They're using it today. It handles tons of parcels, so I'm happy with it. And like all of our work, it's open source. So if you're really interested in the technical details, then you're very, very welcome to go and take a look at the code. It's on GitHub. But aside from that, I'll open to any questions that we might have had during the talk. And if not, we've got the rest of the lightning talks to get on with. So let me just open up Teams and have a quick look.
So if you'd like to submit a question, you all right, Adam?
Yeah, go on, Ryan. Yeah, I was just about to say what you were, I think.
Oh, yeah, if you'd like to submit a question and you're on Teams, we have the Q&A thing enabled. If you're on the Discord audience, then feel free to post your question in #lobby text. And okay, first question, why didn't they get Rolf to test the new software? I feel like the answer might be clear.
So I actually spent some time trying to get a Rolf at Warwick sort of test user created in our system, because I thought it would be sort of nicer than the random fox that we have that's sort of become our testing mascot. But I don't have permission to create users, sadly. So hopefully one day we'll be able to get Rolf in the system and have some representation for him.
Oh, we have some questions coming in on the live event Q&A thing as well.
Oh, brilliant. So it's nice to see that some people have already used it. What's it like being a contract dev? This is a really interesting one. I really enjoy it. I spent some time sort of doing permanent work. It's a company called F-Secure. I used to be MWR, and before that, I sort of did employed work as a C# developer. I really like the freedom that I have to work with different clients. There are drawbacks in that you maybe don't have the guarantee of work, you don't have the holiday pay, that sort of thing, or sick pay. But it's really nice for me to have the mixture of work, to be able to do the Rails stuff and also the Warwick stuff. And yeah, it's worked out for me. I enjoy it. Another question about the SQL injection. Yes. So the alternating case. Yeah. So the reason that was there was because the way they had fixed the injection was they had just done a sort of find and replace. So if you had the word union or select or like in your tracking string, it would just replace it with empty string. But unfortunately, they'd done it sort of in a case sensitive way. So they replaced lowercase union, lowercase select, lowercase like with empty string, and uppercase union, uppercase select, uppercase like with empty string. But they hadn't considered the fact that you could do capitals and mixed case. And the other thing that they also replaced was the space character, which made it really challenging to be able to write a valid SQL query. And the way I worked around that was by using tabs instead. So it turns out that MySQL will treat a tab character in exactly the same way as it will treat a space character. So if you ever have a SQL injection bug you're trying to exploit, and they've done nonsensical things like that, instead of fixing it properly, try a tab character, try messing with the case of your keywords and see what you get. Another question about open source and security hurdles. So yeah, this is an interesting one. I guess I've always been of the opinion that security for obscurity isn't ideal, and so quite a lot of Warwick things are open source. The way we do single sign-on authentication, that the client that powers that is open source, and I'm reasonably happy with that. It was a little bit nerve-wracking when we originally open sourced some of our projects, because I think you get used to being in a closed environment, and although it's bad practice, I remember having to go through and look for stuff like hard-coded secrets in our Git code bases and remove them from the Git history. So it was a little bit scary, but I'm ultimately glad that there are eyes on this sort of thing, and I think that hopefully people would report anything they spotted. It's no different to having OpenSSL open source in that respect. So, did you enjoy your time at Warwick? Were you satisfied with the CS course? Yes, I enjoyed my time at Warwick. I think I learned a lot of life skills during that process. I really enjoyed my intercalated year. I think that was a really good thing for me to have done. So I spent a year doing information security consulting during my intercalated year, and that was great. I got to go and see the outside world a little bit, go and do some consulting work, and sort of understand the business perspective of things. In terms of teaching, I think there were some very good lecturers at Warwick, and they were very good at what they did, and I sort of enjoyed the teaching that they did, and also the dissertation project. I found that really useful. So it was nice to go and do that sort of independent project, have some time to go and spend on that alone and see where it went, and I found that valuable. But I think people take away different things from university. People have different opinions on teaching and learning and what's important to them. And at the end of the day, you've got to make up your mind on what you really think about it. How did you get involved with projects like this, or even find out there's a need for a solution? So for me, I suppose I was bored as an undergrad and decided to break it. And then when it came to this came up, I think, in IT services, because we'd had a security audit done, and it was identified that we needed to improve our security posture. So we were looking at our sort of known risks, and the post tracker was a risk. It had nobody to maintain it. It had known issues. It was hosted on our network, and it was vulnerable to SQL injection. So it needed to be properly sorted. And so the opportunity was there. Then, it sort of made sense for me to be involved with it, because I knew how it worked. And my point of contact at work said, "Hey, do you want to look at this project, just as a small one, spend a couple of weeks on it and see where it goes?" And I said, "Yeah, I think it will be fun." And it was. Yeah, it was a good fun project, and I enjoy working on it now. Small maintenance tasks, that sort of thing. Another question: did you choose databases as an optional module? Yes, I did. Yes. What do I remember from databases? We did some Oracle. We did some relational algebra. It was a reasonable sort of introduction to databases. I don't think it covered much on the security side. It was more sort of the theory sort of stuff, but I guess that's what you get with a computer science course. It's going to be theoretical. I'm glad I did it. Ultimately, I did decently in it. If you're considering taking it, then yeah, have a look at the syllabus, see what you think. Look at the other modules. I think it's a second year one, so CS2-3 you should totally do security. Consider that one first. And I think that's it for questions.